Alexa Donne here, and today I want to talk about some of the random things that happen in publishing that make you inexplicably happy, joyous, that give you that little spark, that make some of the not so nice things, which I have a whole video on, it makes it all worth it, essentially, hopefully, maybe. Because, you know, everyone loves kind of the dark side of things and a slightly negative listicle, but why not focus on some of the good things? And I actually had this idea because something happened and it made me really, really happy, and it's a funny little thing. Some of these you might not think of. It is sometimes the surprising things, and I went, oh, it's like things like this that just like, it doesn't matter some of the stuff that's frustrating or doesn't go exactly the way you expect. This is cool. And I was like, that's video. So most of these are mine, but I did ask a couple of published author friends of mine, what are some of the things that do this for them? So I got some extra ones that bring other authors joy, these little things that happen. So with that in mind, these aren't the more obvious things, the things that of course are gonna make you happy, like selling for a ton of money or being a lead title or getting chosen for a book club or being a bestseller. Obviously those are amazing. They would make any of us happy. But it's the little things. So the first thing is anytime someone organically features your book on social media. And what I mean by organically, though I will say if your publisher is paying for things, that also like gives you a little thrill. But there's something magical about seeing a real deal reader, someone who you don't know personally, who no one paid to pick up your book, who organically picked it up out of interest, and then they post about it. Sometimes you see them randomly or by searching your tag, but I do get this nice little thrill when I am tagged in something nice that someone has to say somewhere like Instagram or Twitter. It's just really, really nice. Every time it's like that little feeling of like, I guess I'm a real author. You're a real author when people read your book and you didn't even have to pay them to do it. Similarly, the second one is when people tag you or alert you to pictures they took at a bookstore, at a brick and mortar bookstore, of your book on the shelf or as part of a display. Even when they like don't, but you see like someone's taken a picture of someone else's book, but you spot yours in it. That is an amazing and magical feeling. And FYI, like to you out there, especially if an author isn't like a big deal author, if they're not famous and a bestseller, like if you do see their book at the bookstore, snap a pic and like tag them on Twitter. You're always going to make their day. Trust me, it's really cool. The third one, you know, it's a little thing, and it is that orange Amazon banner. The banner you get when you're #1 in any category. It is a nice little feeling. That said, it is kind of funny because it's subject to the whims of how your book gets categorized, because as we all know, it's far easier to get that orange banner in more obscure categories, but who cares? It's still an amazing feeling. So the fourth one is actually the thing that inspired this video. I don't know why I made it fourth, but I did. When you log on to the local library site, in my case it's the LA Public County Library, and you see that your book has a bunch of holds on it. There is a wait to read your book. Also, it's kind of cool to see when they have more than one copy and like they're all checked out, but just like that feeling of people are really reading my book. And like, don't sleep on libraries. Libraries are amazing. If you are a library reader, thank you. Request books from your local library, put holds on them, read them. It's just like, again, I guess so many of these come back to that feeling of like, readers who I didn't have to pay like my book. That's, or reading my book, regardless of whether they like it. And it's that like, I'm a real author feeling. And also generally, I've gotten the same thrill. Like I had a friend who works in the Chicago public library system look up my books, and like hearing from her like the number of holds, just like it kind of like warms your heart. She's also looked up for me like how many times it's been checked out, my different books, and it's just like, especially as someone who grew up a library reader, like that was pretty much the sole way I had access to books when I was younger. It's like I get a particular thrill out of library related things. And actually the fifth thing is about libraries, and that is seeing the number of copies of your books are distributed nationwide in libraries. It's obviously a very American thing. It is possible to look up those numbers, but like, as I said, I have many librarian hookups. Like when you become an author, inevitably some of your author friends will be librarians. There are certain careers that are a little more common in our spheres than others, and it's really cool when they tell you, oh, there are X number of copies circulating nationwide. It's just, again, like for me, it's that thrill of like, I'm in libraries. It's like the dream. And actually kind of related to that, it's like if the library one and the bookstore one had a baby, I also love seeing photos of my book on display at libraries. I've been tagged in a few of those, and again, it's always the thrill. The next one is anytime you see someone buddy reading your book. Obviously that's an ultra specific thing, but it's still kind of cool whether it's buddy reading or you're selected for a book club, but to like know that like a group of friends are reading your book and they're talking about it. And the next thing, at least for me, like any event invitation, it's like someone thought I was marginally important enough to invite to a bookish event. I imagine for some authors that feeling maybe like wears off if they're invited to things all the time or they're exhausted by events, but I still get that thrill every time of simply being asked to attend an event, because it feels like an honor, because there's so many authors out there. And I've talked about this in other videos, in the competition video most recently, that like there is a lot of competition to be invited to events, and I mean, this is, the point of this video is happiness, but I've also talked about before that there is that swoop of disappointment when you don't get invited to or you don't get accepted to a festival or event that you really wanted to go to. So any event invitation is a nice, happy win. Speaking of events, the next one is also like, I'm a glass half full kind of person, and that is literally the happiness, the joy, the satisfaction at a bookish event of having literally anyone come to your signing line. You know, especially when you're starting out, you're not gonna have that really long bonkers line that we've all seen for like the darlings and the bestsellers, and you shouldn't expect that. And if you go to an event with that expectation, you are going to end up being disappointed. But go with no expectations, and it's honestly like the feeling's pretty amazing and a little nerve-wracking, to be honest. Anytime there's anyone in your signing line, like they're there, they bought a copy of your book, they put it in front of you, and you sign it for them, and it's like, so I have been lucky to do some events where they were large events and there were like huge authors there. And of course they had really long lines, but like for me, it's like I had 15 people come through my line over the course of an hour, and that's amazing. But even if it's 2 or 3, that's 2 or 3 people who want to talk to you and get you to sign their book. And the other one that kind of attaches this one, and it's kind of cool and it has happened to me, is when the bookseller at the book event sells out of your book. I mean, maybe they only had so many copies, but still, they sold out of them, which tells that bookseller, oh wow, this author came to this event. And essentially they hand sold all of these copies, like they were on panels and, you know, talking about their book. And then the X number of people, let's say it's 10 people, 15 people, were interested enough to buy the book. Now that bookseller is aware of your book, and maybe they will hand sell it in their store, order more inventory. So it's just a really cool feeling. And I mentioned signing books at events, and honestly, signing your books, period, is like that happy thing, especially the first time, like you have that crisp book and you open it to the title page and you sign it and you're like, I have arrived. And honestly, that thrill kind of doesn't go away. It's a thrill every single time you end up signing a book. The next one is about NetGalley, and it is if you are lucky enough to have your book end up on the most requested page for your category. It is a really cool feeling to just kind of like see it end up on page 1. Sometimes you're in the first row. That's happened to me once, and it's just like, first of all, that sometimes you're sitting next to some incredible books, but it's just that warm fuzzy feeling that enough people want to read your arc that like you're on the most requested page. Next is when a reader, a real deal reader, sends you a lovely email or a DM just saying that they loved your book, liked your book, it touched them in a specific way, and thank you. We can't always reply to these things, sometimes a bandwidth thing, but trust me, it's always nice to receive. anytime you're reaching out to an author just to tell them like nice things that you appreciated their book or that it touched you in a specific way, trust me, it is appreciated. Because I mean, we get plenty of emails that aren't like that, that are asking us to read their manuscript or introduce people to their agent. And it's nice to just get an email that says like, hey, I see you. I loved your book. Always a nice little moment. And again, I mentioned it before, I'm terrible at doing these in order, but the next thing is booksellers. When you hear, like a bookseller tells you or a customer tells you that a bookseller is hand selling your book. Don't underestimate the power of hand selling, by the way. This is why it's still very important to network with booksellers. Not necessarily you personally, by the way. This is something that your publisher does. Their entire trade shows where they're trying to get titles on the radar of booksellers. Plus sales forces will do like visits and mailings and whatnot. But sometimes it is a matter of you making a connection with a bookseller. But either way, it is just the coolest feeling knowing that someone came into a bookstore and they were looking for a book and the bookseller talked to them and they handed them your book. Similarly, if you hear from a teacher who says that their students loved your book, or even if you have actual communication with the class. I once did a book club with, they were either like young high school students or middle schoolers. And like, there's something just special about like, it's a teacher, it's students, like actual teens, TM, getting a kick out of your book. And it's that warm, fuzzy feeling. The next little cool, happy, fun thing is when you finally get to meet your online author friends IRL. Obviously, you only get to have that feeling for the first time, one time, but it's pretty cool. A lot of our relationships exist almost exclusively online for years and years and years. And so it's just that great moment. And similarly, when you get to meet your editor or your agent for the first time, I still haven't met my agent in person, by the way. So similarly, when you get a thank you in your friends' acknowledgements. Oh, it's a nice little thing to get like a shout out at the back of the book because like you're author friends and like you cheer each other on. Though I have to tell you from the author side, it makes it super nerve-wracking to write those because it's always like, I'm gonna forget someone and I'm gonna make their day worse instead of making their day better. So I always put like a disclaimer in mine that say, I'm sure I'm forgetting someone and it makes me a garbage person. Basically, oh, it's so hard. And so people have the great tip, as you're working on a book, keep running track of what you want to put in your acknowledgements so that you don't forget anyone. The next thing is anytime you get fan art. I've had this happen a few times and it had been on my author bucket list, so like I've technically checked that off, but like you could never have too much fan art, honestly. And yeah, you've connected with readers on such a level that someone with artistic talent has made fan art of your book. It is just the coolest feeling, especially as someone who has come from fandom. Yeah. Next is kind of a funny one, but when your publisher comps your book to one of your all-time faves. I know that's like really random, but so the sales team and the marketing team and sometimes your editor, it depends on the context, are gonna like write little pitches and blurbs for your book. And specifically the sales and marketing team will, on like Edelweiss, will put comp titles. And I don't know, it's just the coolest feeling thinking that like you could sit at the table with that book that was formative for you. And the next thing is something that you see a lot of authors tease on Twitter, and how mean to tease, and yet it is one of the giddiest feelings. It's hard to describe to you. The first time you see your cover art, early cover art, just that beautiful thing lands in your inbox and you get to see it for the first time and you start to have a really real concept of what your book is gonna look like. It also can give you a really good idea of like how your publisher sees your book and kind of what you mean to them. That sounds so cheesy, but like, it's when it really starts to feel real. And so like cover drop day, hopefully you like the cover. If you don't, that is a totally different thing for a totally different video. But when it's exactly, well, maybe not exactly what you were picturing, but you weren't picturing it at all, but it's perfect. There is nothing better than that. And last but certainly not least is the first time you hold that book in your hands. The first time is especially special, especially novel. But honestly, every time it's that thrill of happiness. I mean, we've seen a lot of unboxings and like I did like a tour of the Ivies for you. Legitimately, it's that giddy feeling of seeing the real product, of feeling the paper under your hands, turning it over, like seeing anything that they've done to it, like flipping through, and it's a real book. And you know, since the whole spirit of this is there's plenty of things that are gonna bring you down. There are so many frustrations in publishing, but it really does all become worth it when you have that book in your hands. So I think it's important to look for the little moments, to live for the little moments. As I said, this was inspired simply because I thought it was so cool that there were holds for my book at a library. And that's gonna be such small pickings to say a bestseller. But so many things in the industry are relative, and the vast majority of us were not international bestsellers, and so it is the little things that become the big things. I would love to know down below in the comments, those of you who are also authors, what are the little things for you? The things that have just like maybe even surprised you with how happy they made you, considering like relatively speaking it seems so small. Because this was only like a tiny snapshot of like things I could think of and a couple of friends who threw a few additional ones my way. It's gonna be different for every person, and there are always new things to find joy in. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I will make more content about being an author and being published. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing.